Hi, welcome to my podcast, Becoming a Cut Flower Grower. I'm your host, Lydia, and I'm here to share my year of growing and selling cut flowers. I'll be giving you the lowdown on everything I'm doing and sharing all the highs and lows, the good times and the inevitable disasters, all in real time. Join me on my cut flower journey, starting right now. Hello, and a very warm welcome to the latest episode. I hope you're well. We are doing the first episode of 2026. Now, we had snow this morning, so we had a really, really cold snap overnight and this gorgeous light dusting of snow this morning. So I opened the curtains and the first thought was, oh, wow, that is so beautiful. And then the second thought was, I bet my car doesn't start. But it did, bless it, eventually. Now, this cold snap is going to be lasting about a week, and boy, it's going to be really cold. And it's a bit of a shock, really, because we had all this lovely warm November, even December wasn't that bad. And now it's really, really dropped. So I guess the hens did guess correctly that we were going to have a cold snap. I think that explains why they are as fluffy as they are. And it's absolutely treacherous on the field. In fact, this evening was the first evening, I think, in the last few years that I haven't actually been able to get the car up the track to park where I normally park. So it's literally like a sheet of ice in there. So I did some very snazzy maneuvers trying to get the car up there and just eventually just gave up and walked. It's not a very long walk. It's just, I just prefer to have the car up where I am. So I've been laying, I've been laying some of the deep litter from the hen's house out on the pathways because it's quite a steep slope where the chickens are. And it's incredibly slippy. But at least I guess it means the field is draining, or rather the plot is draining, because all the icy water is at the bottom of the field where the gate is. I had to go out and buy some jeans this morning. I managed to split my jeans. Actually, not because I put weight on over Christmas, but because I squat for everything. So I used to bend over at the waist all the time to do absolutely everything. And my other half was always telling me off and like saying how bad it is for my back. And I do have a bad back, but I've been bending over to work that way for so many years that I find it really easy. I don't have any issues. So he's been banging on about me squatting for years. So now I squat all the time, unless there's not enough room, and then I bend over. But anyway, I was squatting, and the other day there was this terrible rip, and all of the undercarriage of my jeans just broke open. So I had to go and buy another pair this morning, which is very irritating, but never mind, it's done now. Now I don't actually really ever talk about anything that's going on in the world, because there's just a never-ending cycle of doom and misery out there, and this is not a depressing or miserable spot, but I have felt very sad the last couple of days after this Swiss spa fire. It's absolutely horrendous, and I can't imagine what those parents are going through. So I'm sending good wishes to anybody that's listening that knows anybody that's been affected by that. It's absolutely dreadful. So, moving on to tonight's episode, I have decided to make a couple of New Year's resolutions this year. Now, normally I make a point of not making any because it's so easy to make them after Christmas. Like, I'm going to eat less, I'm going to go to the gym, which is never, ever going to happen, but I'm going to be fit and I'm going to do this, that, and the other. And it just never works out. And then I'm always disappointed with myself. So, for years and years, no New Year's resolutions at all. This year, I thought I might make a couple, and the main one is actually to just be on time. In fact, it's to be ahead of time. It's to be organized. So with this in mind, I have just bought myself a secondhand smartwatch, which is on its way. So I can actually, hopefully, manage my time a bit better. So I haven't worn a watch for about well over 20 years, 25 years, something like that. And I can tell the time to within about 10, 15 minutes now without having to think about it, which is kind of useful actually. And I just hate having a watch on my wrist, but I've just decided, because my timekeeping is so appalling and I just cannot keep making excuses about time being a social construct and all of that, because sometimes you just have to be somewhere on time. And I always seem to be rushing and just, late for things and then rushing for everything else. And I thought got to stop rushing, or I'm going to just make myself ill. So I have bought this smartwatch, and it should connect. Hopefully it should talk to the phone and do all these clever things. And then I can use it on a voice activated thing, because often my phone is in a pocket. A lot of the time I've got dirty hands, or I've got gloves on, or it's just not convenient to actually just get the phone out and unlock it and find the right app that I want. So my hope is that the smartwatch, I'm going to be able to talk to it, and it can set me reminders and then tell me what I need to do and where I need to be. And I will be looking at the numbers on it all the time. So I should, in theory, not be late for anything else, and cut down on the numbers of post-it notes that I use. And in the spirit of being ahead of time, get this, I have bought my first Cadbury's cream eggs. So yes, I know that's terrible. And I was complaining a few weeks ago that I should only have things when they are seasonal and when it's the right time. And we are absolutely nowhere near Easter. So I'm going against what I said, but I saw them in the garage and I thought, yes, that is exactly what I need in my life right now. So I have some cream eggs. Can't actually remember where I've put them, so I probably won't get to eat them till Easter. But so this evening, I thought I would answer some questions that listeners have sent in, and these are brilliant questions. And I thought I'll answer them on the podcast, and the answers might be of interest to you. Now, the first question was about the roses that I have just planted out on the field and how I plant mine. And the answer to this is I've done a real quick and dirty one on this one. I have talked on the podcast before about some of the differences between gardening and cut flower farming, and how it can be a bit of a hindrance sometimes to switch from gardening to cut flower growing, because you bring lots of bad habits with you, particularly in terms of things like spacing and being quick and everything else. And this was an example of where I've kind of disregarded everything that I would do in a normal horticultural setting with roses. So traditionally, when I plant them, I would really take my time with it. I would do it slowly with great care. I'd dig a really nice big square hole, not a round one, so the roots don't go round in a circle. If you do a square one, when they come to a corner, they're more likely to go out than round. And I would add all sorts of amendments if necessary. Often people's soils are just pretty terrible, so there's all the usual bits and pieces that you would add in. And I also wouldn't time myself either. So this one was done super quick. So I managed to get every rose in the ground in between 2.5 and 3 minutes per rose. I didn't dig a very big hole. I'm a huge fan of no dig, as you know already on the plot, but clearly you have to dig holes at some point to put plants in. So it's not a daft no dig policy. But I did the smallest hole I could get away with. And in fact, the technique turned out to be almost like how you would heel them in. So you put the spade in, and in an ideal world, your spade would go right into the depth of the spade, and then you just pull the spade sideways, and you have like a smooth wall, and then you just pop the roses in, and then you just push the soil back. So that's not possible on my plot because there are far too many stones. So I didn't manage to get the spade into the ground. Once it goes in about an inch, and then you have to stop, ferret about, pull the rock out, keep going. But generally speaking, I wanted the minimal amount of soil disturbance on this one, and I wanted to be as quick as possible, because this is all part of being able to calculate the cost of production for the flowers. So you know how long it's taken you to do anything to do with that plant. So planting time, watering time, pruning, mulching, absolutely everything you do, so that you can work out your pricing, or certainly it can help to feed in to pricing when you come to it. So I ended up with sort of rectangular holes, and I did do a little bit of root pruning because I just literally don't have the soil depth to have 12 inches worth of roots going down. So the roots are going to have to go sideways, and I think it'll be fine because everybody else has managed, and the dahlias have managed, and the shrubs all seem to be fine. So I think that'll be fine. And I haven't added any amendments whatsoever. Now, I feel quite confident in the quality of the soil. I know from everything I've grown on the plot in the last few years how well it's all done. So although I haven't had a soiled test done on the field, I didn't want to start adding anything. And in fact, I don't use any synthetic fertilizers anyway. So it would be chicken manure in the form of like their deep litter, which would be laid as a mulch. I don't dig it in either. And it would be something like, liquid seaweed or any of the nettle teas, the nettle feeds. I'm hoping to do a comfrey one this year. I haven't done that before. So I haven't done any of that business, none of that mycorrhizal dust that people put in the holes either. And so far, they seem absolutely fine. But the point was to do it as quickly but properly as possible. So there is a bit of a balance to be struck between that. And I also did them in color order so that it looks nice. So it did take me a little bit of time in the feed room to work out the order, and then obviously set them all out, position them all out, get the spacing right as well. So I have planted them closer than you would normally do in a garden setting. Now, one of the things about roses is that you learn, so it's like a never ending journey if you're going to learn everything about roses. And there are all these sort of rules and things you can or can't do. And supposedly roses don't like this and they don't like that, and they don't like things too close to them. In a real life setting, I have not found that to be an issue at all. And my garden is planted very densely and I've never had any issues whatsoever. So I think you have to be sensible about it and say, if my soil is great, if I have plenty of airflow, and obviously don't put a really hyper aggressive spreading plant anywhere near your roses. That's just common sense. But things like, hardy geraniums and Nepeta. I think Nepeta is lovely around the bases of roses. So it is possible to do things that all of the books and all the advice will tell you can't possibly do, or the roses will die, because they just won't. I find them to be incredibly robust and tough plants, and they will outcompete loads and loads of other things. And also their roots go really nice and deep. Although my guys are going to have to go deep sideways, not deep straight down. Hopefully they will work that out. So I have planted them closer than I would if it was in a garden setting, because they are supposed to be growing as cut flower roses. So they can't just have masses and masses of space. If I have made some mistakes, then there is still space to move them around and spread them out a little bit. Now, the second question that I've got is about bearded iris. Now, this is a great question I had from a listener off the back of the last episode. And she asked me, she's a bearded iris lover, and she asked whether the bearded iris rhizomes would get enough sun in the summer, in light of the fact that I had interplanted them between my peonies. Now, the answer to this is I think so, because what I normally do with my peonies, and this is what I do at home, and I do this for my clients as well, is that before the buds, or basically when the plant is up in the spring, before it flowers, I tie the peony foliage on the stems just below the leaf canopy to kind of hold the plant in an upright position and stop the stems from flopping outwards. It also supports the heads, and it kind of concentrates the sun on this dense canopy if all of the leaves are facing in an upward direction. So I don't tie it tight like you're going to tie a bouquet of flowers up. It's literally just a nice relaxed piece of string that sits just under the canopy, so you can't see it. It's not obvious. And sometimes I loop it through some of the stalks so that the string doesn't fall down the stems. And so my plan is I will be doing that with the peonies this year, and hopefully this technique will allow enough sunlight to reach the iris rhizome, which is the thick fat bit that you see sitting on the soil, and allow enough sunlight to come down and do that. If I've made a mistake and it looks like my plan is not working, then I will just move some of the rhizomes. Now, the rhizomes need to have this full sun. They need to have excellent drainage, and the rhizome needs to be exposed at the soil surface in order to perform to the best of its abilities. They really do need to bake in the sunshine. So that's that. And I'll keep you updated on that, but really fantastic question. And then my third and final question for this evening is from a regular listener in Sweden who's doing fantastic things out there. I love to see her Instagram pictures. And she asked a question about succession plantings and could I share my plan if I'm doing successions this year? Now, I will be doing it. I haven't got my entire crop plan finalized. It was something that I thought I would be doing over the Christmas period, and I will fill you in on why I haven't achieved as much as I would have liked to next week. But I did experiment with succession sowing last year. And I did a kind of a spreadsheet on paper, wrote everything down, had all these columns for when I want to sow it, and then counted forward a couple of weeks, did a few more seeds in a couple of weeks, and just kind of carried on going. But it didn't have any sort of methodology or plan or thought about it because I didn't know what I was doing. And I should caveat this advice by saying I'm not an expert. It's like I am learning all of the time. But I want my succession sowing in 2026 to have purpose rather than just be me sowing seeds every 2 weeks, because there was absolutely no thought that went behind that. And the whole point of the succession sowing is that you get a smooth, regular supply of plants rather than having gluts. So it also helps to extend the season, obviously, and it's an insurance policy in case you lose one batch for any particular reason. So in 2026, this year, I say it 2026 like it's something in the future. We're actually already in it. It's weird, that transition from one moment to the next. I'm actually going to be using the days to flowering dates and harvesting dates this year so that I can work out how many days from sowing the seed to the plant actually flowering. Now, my Dahlia mentor, Richard Bailey, he does this all the time, and he knows all of the days that will, what am I trying to say here? He knows all the days from when the first tiny bud appears on a Dahlia to when it will open. And he knows all of this data off the top of his head for all the different Dahlia varieties there are. And of course, the exhibitors need to know this, because if you know that you need to have, say, 20 Dahlia blooms for a particular event like the National Dahlia Society show or your local show, and you know you need the blooms ready on that exact day, then you count back the number of days that you know it's going to take from bud to bloom. And you know on that date, the previous one, that you need to make sure that you've got buds ready. So it means you can disbud everything else that you don't want, and you focus entirely on that bud that you do want. And you know that, say, in 70 days' time, that bud is going to be at the perfect stage of opening. So the exhibitors really are the experts in all of this, and we are basically just going to imitate the techniques that they use. Now, some of the seed packets don't tell you how many days from sowing to flowering. And of course, there are lots of variables that can affect this, which could be why they don't put it on the packet. So if you use some kind of bottom heat, or if you have a cold snap or some inclement weather, there are lots of things that can impact it. But basically, you're going to have a guideline of how many days it's going to take from sowing to flowering. And this information is available online as well. I believe it's available on Johnny's Seeds website, which I think is an American seed company. And I think they give you all that information over there. So you could go and work out, I will be going to work out the number of days to flowering. And that's going to be like my guideline. So I'm going to be working out when I would like to have the first cut, the first harvest of a particular flower. And then I can track back and make sure that I have sown in time to hit that date, assuming obviously it's reasonable. There's no point me saying, oh, I want a zinnia flowering in April, because I don't have tunnels or heat or anything, and that's ridiculous because that's just not going to happen. So you have to bear that in mind, how the plant wants to behave naturally anyway. And then I'm going to calculate the last decent cut that I want to have or estimate to have from that plant in order to work out the length of the cropping times. So some plants will have short harvest windows. So this basically, I'm understanding this to mean that they're going to flower over a brief period of time and then the entire crop is finished. So things like Nigella, they don't last particularly long, and once they're done, they're done. You don't get another crop from them. Like, for example, like zinnias, you cut them and then they will branch out from the sides and you'll keep getting more. Things like the scabious, they just kept producing regardless, but things like the Nigella, not so much. So if you're growing them and you want to have a regular supply over the course of the summer, you need to be sowing every 2 to 3 weeks. And then for things that have a longer harvest window, like cosmos, for example, you could sow those every 3 to 4 weeks. So if you wanted, or if I wanted zinnias, for example, to harvest in mid-July, and I know that they're going to crop for 6 weeks, then I know that I'm going to need fresh plants ready to be at the harvestable stage as the first batch are kind of tailing off. And all of this is going to need tweaking and practicing with this year, because my zinnias this year looked lovely for, I think, quite a short window. And then they all just lost the plot and looked awful. So I'm going to have to think about this in a lot more detail, but this is just the general overview of how I'm going to do it this year. And I'm going to try and keep it as simple as possible. It's very important to keep detailed records. They don't have to be complicated, but you do need to make sure you've got all the relevant information on there. And then, like, if you're anything like me, you might need to set reminders to let you know when you need to be doing something. And the objective, of course, is that we don't want to have a massive glut. Like, I don't want to sow 100 cosmos and then have a massive overload of cosmos and then nothing to follow on afterwards. We want to have this kind of seamless overlap and also have a manageable system, because I also don't want to be babysitting seedlings endlessly. Part of the reason that I have changed what I'm growing this year and moved into the roses, the perennials, is so that I don't get overwhelmed with seed sowing. So I have actually reduced the amount of annuals that I'm going to grow this year, and I'm focusing on what I think are nicer varieties. And I also think there are lots of growers around me, and I don't want to grow the same as they're growing, because it just seems a bit pointless, really. And I don't want us to end up competing on price or just flooding the market with more cosmos than florists need, because that's kind of counterintuitive for all of us. So I am going to do some cosmos this year, and I've bought some very pretty ones, and it's mostly because I do not want to be defeated by them. They really let me down this year. They were absolute monsters last year and didn't really flower at all, just loads of foliage. So I'm determined to crack the cosmos this year, which is why I'm doing them. I did hear a tip about sowing. In order to make things even simpler, this whole succession business is to sow fresh seeds when you can see that your existing batch of plants are forming buds, which means that you don't have to have a complicated calendar or diary of dates that you have to be doing X, Y, and Z. You just go out onto the field and see at what stage your existing plants are at, and that will give you an indication of when you need to get the next batch on the go. But there are, of course, because nothing is ever simple, all these other kind of caveats about not sowing too early or too late. So you don't want to sow too late, like I ended up doing with some of my straw flowers, and then you don't actually have enough days to let the plants mature and flower. And you don't want to sow too early and have guys sitting around in trays where it's too cold for them to go out, and they're just going to get really unhappy. So it's a bit of a delicate balance, but I'm very happy to come back and revisit this topic. And I will, of course, talk about it constantly during the spring, because I'm going to have to make a plan for all of this myself. But I hope that gives you a rough idea of what I'm thinking and is some help. So that's all I wanted to talk to you about this evening, actually, because I haven't done anything else on the plot since I last spoke to you. Now, it is, of course, Friday, so we have a lovely weekend to look forward to. And then I will be back with the next episode, as always, on Tuesday. So it has kind of been decided by a popular vote that I'm going to carry on doing 2 episodes a week. So I hope that's great. And I hope you enjoyed the last one, actually. For some reason, it ended up being really, really long. So I hope you've managed to wade your way through that one. And as always, I hope you have a wonderful weekend wherever you are and whatever you're doing. And I love to hear from you. So please come back and join me for the next episode. All the best.